Well, welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. My name is Troy Haynes, the Sky High and Fly Guy, and just coming to you here on a Thursday night in Southern California after training some of my Vanguard pole vaulters. And I have a treat tonight talking with a young man from Canada by the name of George. And we're going to talk with George because he's a master's high jumper like myself. He's getting up there in age a little bit. And we're going to talk about uh, his training. We're going to look at some of his videos and talk about motivation. And I don't know, other than Brad, I think I had Brad Kearns on. And I don't remember when I had Brad on that he was actually doing master's stuff then. And I haven't been able to get Brad to come back. So I'm going to keep trying to shame him into coming back on so we can talk about that. But George, again from Canada, was a jumper in high school and now is competing at the master's level again after 40 something years. So kind of similar to my story from last year. If you were with us when I went to do the US indoor championships after not having jumped indoor since maybe 1990, I think. So it had been 34, something like that, 34 years minimum. And I still don't like jumping indoors. But anyway, we'll talk about that at some length and announcing some up and coming changes. For those of you that have been to my website, I've had on there for a while a jump technique checklist, and we're going to call that the 1.0 because the 2.0 is coming out. I've been working on it for a while with the encouragement of Barb Bachoka, my number one jumper from Canada. She created the first one because she asked me to write down all the things that I'd been teaching her for the first couple of weeks that we'd been training. And I guess it was a lot of stuff. So she said, "Hey, could you write these down?" And when I went through my 5 phases of the high jump, from the straight to the curve to the jump, takeoff to the flight to the layout. So, well, those are our five. And we were working our way through some stuff. And she was just trying to keep it all straight. And when I saw the list, I didn't know that it was going to be that long. So we're announcing that. And now you can see that George Graziani is popping up on our screen. Haven't seen his face yet, but I see that he is in what we call the green room. But before we jump into the podcast, I'd just like to talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, which is staying in shape as you get older. If you've been on the pod before, you may have heard a podcast that I did with Brad Kearns. Now, Brad Kearns is a former #3 in the world ranked Ironman triathlete. And this guy really pushed the envelope. He won over 30 events worldwide, and he was in fantastic shape. And I don't want to use the word was because he's still in fantastic shape. And he's getting up there. You're younger than me. I'm already in my 60s. To stay in shape as you get older, it gets tougher. Go to bradnutrition.com. You will find some great products to help you. One of those is his whey protein isolate powder. You don't have to be a master's athlete to use that. It's a great source of protein. It is made from 100% Wisconsin dairy cows. It's top quality and very easily digested protein. You can try that. I use the vanilla and put it in my shakes and smoothies. You can mix it in with fruit, and it's, again, tastes good. You can also try out his energy drinks if you go to bradnutrition.com. If you want to purchase anything, you can use my promo code Sky High and Fly 10. It's SKYHIANDFLY 10, all small letters. And if you use that promo code, you'll get 10% off at bradnutrition.com. If you'd like to use Amazon, use a similar code. It's SKYHIFLY 10, all caps. You go to Amazon.com and use that one, you'll get the same 10% off. Use those promo codes and get a little break on those products. They're great. Try them out. Let's get on with the pod. After all our incredible difficulties, and thank you to George Graziani, my non-Italian friend from Canada. We're going to hear that story in a second. Just a quick note, those of you that listen to the podcast, again, the way that I found George was I've been less busy on Instagram recently, but I was spending a little time for the first time in a while and happened to be going through my feed, and I got George's stuff popped up. And I saw that he was training, and I also noticed that he had mentioned in one of the posts, I don't know where it came up, if I read it or if it was on the screen on the captions, but I saw that he mentioned that he had been sober for a certain amount of time. And that caught my eye and just, hit me in the heart. And I was just curious to, find out exactly, what that meant, because I know that sobriety can mean a lot of things. Some people talk about it from alcohol, and some people talk about it from drugs. And, so for whatever it is, deciding to get that thing out of your life and, push ahead. Anyway, it hit me, and I kind of was super intrigued to hear the story. But you had mentioned that there was a lot of things that we have in common, so I was kind of curious about that too. So, welcome to the show, George. How are you doing, man? It's late up there. You look cold. You're wearing a toque. Yours.
I am cold. I'm very jealous of your Southern California weather, and but I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It was kind of one of those Canadian days where I kind of dread it because this is something probably very foreign to you, but we have two sets of tires for our cars. We
Mm.
have winter tires. I don't know if that's even a concept that you
Not
can
in Southern
fathom
California.
down
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So today was the day that I went out and changed over my tires from the summer tires to the winter tires.
Right.
And, it's sort of like a perfect timing thing. You try to leave it as long as you can, but you don't
Right.
want to leave it too long because if it snows, which it did a couple of days ago, you're kind of busted.
Then you're stuck, right? Because you can't drive around without, or you can, but it's super slow and tedious, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, George, so catch us up. I saw the number 60. I don't want to make you older than you are. You're in your 60s?
I am 61, so I was born in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would make me. And by the way, first off, let me just thank you for creating this podcast
Oh,
and
yeah.
creating a
Welcome.
beacon. I've been listening religiously to your episodes. As I think I mentioned, I started back at the beginning because I didn't want to ruin the story. So I'm a little bit behind. I'm still back in 2022.
Right?
So
Yeah.
I want to, but I'm enjoying it so much, and I appreciate, you and all the guests are fantastic, and it's very generous of you to lower the bar tonight to
Oh,
allow me in.
I don't think
Uh,
so. I don't think so. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, George, and it has been a journey. I rarely get a chance to reflect on it, and I haven't really had a chance to go back and re-listen myself. I'm one of those feeders. I'm always trying to, bring in stuff. Like I said, when I scan Instagram, I'm not usually looking for, anything other than what is somebody doing when they're training. Like when I get a chance, to me, it's a free peek behind the curtain. So when I see someone from Hungary, when I see someone from Sweden, when I see someone from Finland, when I see someone from South Africa, we just did a podcast from South Africa. I had this one jumper that I would love to get on. Her name is Betsabe Paez from Argentina. She's this little pixie, like 5'6", and she's jumped 5'11", and she has one of the most beautiful layouts I have ever seen in my life. And I use her stuff to show my athletes, look at this. This is
mhm.
gold standard, So I not only look for really good technique, but I'm also looking for training. I'm looking for coaches. There's coaches that I really want to sit down and just interrogate them almost with Nazi-like intensity. Like, okay, you must tell me, how it is that you got this out of your athletes, because like the guy that coach Steve Jones is at Grand Valley State, and he at current count has four guys jumping 7'3" or better. And
Well,
in 2024, three of them made it to the Olympic trials, and they were all Division two, NC2A. And I don't think I've ever heard of even a Division one school doing that. Now, as soon as I say that, somebody will come up and give me the thing and say it's happened before, but it's pretty amazing, and I watch his jumpers and I'm like, oh man, this guy's got some great stuff here, So I keep trying to get him on, and he's either real quiet or, Steve, you're a knowledge hoarder. I don't know if he's listening, but anyway, that's my motivation. And it wasn't that so much as, like I said, it kind of tugged on my heart, and I wanted to hear the story because it just sounds like it's got to be a great story, that you're back training after, so many years. I was in the warm up. I was right before you came on. I was telling everybody that last year I tried to go at the uh, the USATF indoor championships, and I just on a whim said I'll do it. I didn't even have shoes. I ended up buying shoes in a hurry, and they were half a size too small. And then, I forgot how much I hated indoors, and I flew all the way to Florida. And it was like, I mean, it was just crazy. And I again hated indoors, but I went through it. But it had been literally not quite as long as you, because I had competed up until the time I was 28. And I took my last shot at the Olympic trials in 1992. And then I was done. When I hung it up, because I waited a while, like 28 is a long time, right? I graduated off the track team when I was 22. So it had already been 6 years on my own. And when I finally said, you know what? I haven't jumped any higher than 222 since I was 22 years old. I think I've topped out. And I finally said, I'm going to get a career. And, so that took a long time. And, that was, so I was 28 when I stopped and you were 18, but it was a long haul for me to come back to the indoors, and then, but let's stop hearing about me and hear about you. Tell us a little bit about your sports background, how you got started in high jumping, and then what you did after high school that caused that long pause in your athletic career.
Okay, for sure. Well, when I was a little kid, up until probably around 14, I was very athletic and super interested in sports and played so many, played, soccer. I played tennis. I swam pretty competitively in that, and baseball and hockey. I'm Canadian, so I still play hockey Tuesday
Let's say,
mornings.
right?
It's
Yeah,
hockey morning. Little shout out to my hockey buds if they happen to tune in. That's a
absolutely.
crazy thing. And I played basketball as well, and that was kind of in high school I played basketball. I didn't start basketball till high school, and what got me into track and specifically high jump initially was watching two things. One, watching the Olympics in 72 and then 76 here in Canada, in Montreal.
Yeah, I bet.
And I'm trying to remember how it all happened, because I remember in 76 watching Greg Joy against Dwight Stones,
Mhm.
and I knew I was supposed to cheer for Greg Joy, but Dwight Stones was just so cool.
Yeah,
It was like, who is this guy
yeah,
wandering around in a Mickey Mouse shirt, and just
yeah.
what a dude. Now he got in a bit of trouble with the French, but whatever.
French
And
guy.
so, anyways, I knew about high jump then,
Uh-huh.
and I was following it. And the way I learned about it is I don't know if they have the same thing in California, but in Toronto and in the provinces are like states here,
Hmm.
um, which I mean is Ontario. There was a thing called Parks and Recreation in the summer, where they'd sort of send a man and a woman, or basically they were like early 20s-year-olds, and they were sent to parks and schools to spend the summer and organize sports and games and stuff for kids. This was back in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And I remember we had one guy come, we had a lot and they were fantastic. Basically lived on the park. It was like hippies there. It was a wild place.
Right.
And we had one guy who we called Gilligan. I don't know if you must have watched Gilligan's
Absolutely.
Island. This
Yep.
guy looked like Gilligan. He wore a hat like Gilligan. He was also like Encyclopedia Brown for track and field. He
Hmm.
himself was a distance runner, and he was so enthusiastic. He taught us all the long jump, and he had us high jumping into a sand pit.
Right.
So we're doing scissors. There was no
Right.
Fosbury
Yeah.
there,
Plowing on your back in the sand. Yeah.
and all sorts of tricks. He was really sort of the guy who got us into high jump, and so that's how we knew about it. And
Awesome.
I liked it. Um, and then I didn't touch it at all. And the bizarre thing is, I played, some sports in high school. I was more, I guess I got into student politics a little bit and other stuff. So it wasn't a huge thing. I wasn't like gifted, but for somehow I made it I got into high jump. I don't remember training at all. I
Hmm.
remember getting into like our provincial finals, which would be like getting into state. So it
Hmm.
must have been a very tough year to find anyone who could jump, because I had no business being there, and that was pretty evident once I got there and started talking to one. I met one guy there, and he was like, "Oh, how do you train?" And I'm like, "Train? Not really. I didn't really do any training."
Right.
And he was like, "Oh, well, we run stairs, and and he was kind of like you. He was like had this whole, bounding up and down the stadium stairs and stuff." And
Right.
it looked like he did. Like his legs were bigger than my whole body. It was just ridiculous.
Right.
But anyway, so I had a good. I enjoyed it immensely, and I jumped over my head, which was pretty cool. Like that
Qualified
was,
you as a high
so I think I
schooler.
jumped. This is, nothing, probably nothing for you or any of your listeners, but for me, it was a big deal to get over my head. I was about 5'10", and I think I jumped 5'11".
Very.
And I went home, and I never jumped again. I never really thought about it
Right.
for years and years. In fact, I didn't really do sports for another, I don't know, almost like 15 years. I focused on studies, and there's a whole bunch of stories there I can tell you about. But um, athletically, I took a major pause, just really to focus on a bunch of other things. I got into some pretty competitive mathematics, believe it or not,
Uh-huh.
at university. And that was like, again, I was in way over my head. And so I had to focus a lot on that, just to kind of keep up with the other kids. And yeah, and I hadn't, like, I'd done athletic stuff. I started running again when I was about in my early 30s,
Hmm.
or not running again, just running, period, because
Right.
I'd never really ran.
To stay in shape.
And interestingly enough, that was more for like mental health, I'd say, than physical. Like it sort of, it added another element to my life that was, kind of calmed my mood. So I felt very level-headed when I would run. And I got kind of into that. I also wanted to set an example for my son, who was born around then, and just be healthy. And we have a thing in Canada. I don't know. I might as well get this out as sort of as definitions, but there's something, I don't know, culturally, when I was growing up, called partying. I don't know what you call it exactly down there, and that
Understand.
could involve a variety of basically bad habits,
Hmm.
smoking cigarettes, um, smoking pot, and drinking beers and wine, and
Right.
the list can go on. And I started doing that when I was about 14,
Hmm.
and continued on until about when my son was born. And it would go in waves, like more or less at different times. And then I kind of quit smoking cigarettes, and drank a little bit, but not much. And then I got serious about the running, and that turned into triathlon. Um, there's a very good triathlon program in Ontario,
Okay.
where they have races all the time,
Right.
and it's very easy to fall into that, which I did. And uh, I ended up doing a large triathlon when I was about 40, and that was kind of the peak of that. I did an Ironman Brazil, which was
Wow.
kind of the opposite of high jump, which, as
Oh,
you
yeah.
rightly point out, is about a 7-second sport.
Yeah, at the most,
and
maybe
and
four.
an Ironman triathlon was like, I mean, my race was like 15 hours ish.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
that
Yeah.
a totally different kind of mindset and training. And so one of the things I'd love to get out of you in this, because I'm a little like you. I'm trying to be like a sponge and get the knowledge on how to train for high jump, and because it's very different from the
Oh,
slow
yeah.
twitch endurance stuff. And
Sure.
so how to do that safely as a 61-year-old person
Right.
who hasn't done a lot of explosive dynamic
Yeah.
stuff in a while.
Yeah.
Um,
That's interesting.
and
Well, yeah. We'll finish up and
uh,
we'll come back to that.
Okay, let me get us back. So I'm at about 40. I've done the Ironman. Then
Right.
I kind of slipped back in. My job was very intense at that point, and ended up, kind of coming back to the smoking in my mid 40s, smoking
Pressure relief.
cigarettes,
Yeah.
and and then, like, now pot is legal here in Canada. I don't know. I think it's legal in California.
Yes, it
So
is.
that sort of crept back in. And I don't want to give you a wrong impression. I wasn't like a major alcoholic or,
Right.
at least in my mind, I mean, and I certainly don't judge anyone who has this. I'd say it was more, just part of our social uh, DNA up here
Yeah.
for at least the people I knew, and I didn't feel like I was like extreme. That said, when I was 57, so 4 years ago, oh, one other thing, we had COVID, and just before COVID, I got into something else, which I should tell you sports wise, which was calisthenics,
Mhm.
which is, I don't know if a lot of people are into that down there, but my son actually got into it. And he was very, very, doing push ups, and we had a pull up bar, and we were doing all that stuff.
Mhm.
And he got me into it, and it was showing me how to do this. So I got, you know, pretty interested in that. And that was like some good workouts. And the holy grail of that, which I bring it up because it's also explosive dynamic stuff, but the
Mhm.
holy grail of that, which we pursued bizarrely, was a muscle up. I don't know if you or
Yeah.
your listeners are familiar with.
Instead of a pull up, you pull from the bar from straight overhead to your hips, right? A
That's right,
Yeah.
right.
I've-
Which, as it turns out, is
Yeah.
ridiculously hard,
Yeah.
and it's similar in a way to high jump because it's explosive. You've
Mhm.
got to have quick. It's about the quickness, and it also involves a bar,
Yeah.
and it's your body weight getting up above a bar. So it's kind of interesting that way.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any luck with that, and we tried and we tried and we played around with all sorts of things. And then we met, and my son's name's Sam, by the way. Shout out to Sam.
Shout out to
And
Sam.
then we there's all these parks in Toronto. It's a very different kind of layout from many American cities where integrated within the city are these ravines and parks and stuff. And so
Right.
we go walking through there, and there were all these calisthenic setups, and people, around the city do that. And the place where we were at, we ran into this guy, Alex. And Alex was in his early 50s. And he was like banging out muscle ups like there was no tomorrow. And we're
Mhm.
like, what the heck? How is this guy doing this?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, turns out Alex was from Belarus, the Russian guy.
Ah.
And he had grown up there. And they're like, when they're 10 years old, they just get sent to the woods to do calisthenics. I mean, so he had been doing it for ages, and
Mhm.
he totally knew what he was doing. And so we made friends with him, and he got us eventually to do muscle ups. And he's a good friend. So shout out to Alex.
Awesome.
But you want to get to the 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 gritty story of the sobriety and how that
Well, yeah,
happened.
you mentioned that you didn't think it was that you weren't a huge partier, but then, you said there might have, I don't know. I'll let you
Well,
tell.
something happened when I was 57, so 4 years ago, and that's probably the post you saw was related to that. I had a heart attack.
Mm.
Boom. And it was like in the middle of the night, and well, it was Halloween night, and instead of, okay, so this is kind of like the public service part of this thing, is that if you get anything from what I say at all in this podcast, if you start ever getting chest pain, or any of your listeners do, call 911 or go to emergency immediately.
Yeah.
Because I didn't. I did the stupid thing. I just lay in bed and wrote it out, and it was terrible and stupid. Because the next day, when my wife, said, "Listen, you got to get to hospital," I got in there, and then like within an hour, I'm on the operating table. And they're like, "Sir, you're having a heart attack," and so because of that, like a day before that, I was working out with a calisthenics and my son, no problem. The next after the heart attack, because I waited, I lost about 25% of my heart, about a quarter of my heart muscle. Not good thing, and it was ridiculous. So I had to start it, like they were like my exercise, just to give you an example. And this is remembering that I had done an Ironman, so I'd done a lot of exercise in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd done a fair bit of partying too. So let's be honest, I was kind of like a hillbilly athlete. So I'd do a little bit of partying, and I'd also do a little bit of athletics. So
Right.
and my theory was that they'd balance each other. And that theory turned out to be incorrect. They
Right.
do not balance each other. And anyway, so the next day, the nurse said, okay, your exercise today, Sarah, is to sit in a chair. That was the workout.
Right.
And Troy, I can't tell you how exhausting it was to sit in a chair. Like that was crazy. And then like the next day it was like walk across the room 3 steps to get to the door. And so slowly but surely after like months, I got my health back. And that was when I decided to cut out, cigarette smoking, pot smoking, alcohol, fast food, um, and have since 4 years.
Awesome.
And so that's what took me on that journey. I was kind of scared straight, as they say.
Right.
And
So that was a sobering experience to come that close to death and realize you could do something about it.
absolutely. I mean, just to be, totally clear, heart disease, so I had a blocked artery. It's largely genetic. I mean, my father had the same thing. But he had it when he was 63, and his exercise was not doing Ironman triathlons. His exercise was walking to the fridge and making a sandwich as big as your head. Like, so, like it was like, so I thought he's 63. I'm 50. Why am I having this at 50? I thought I was going to be,
Yeah.
later than him. But so maybe, it probably was the smoking, the cigarettes.
Yeah, that's what I've
And
heard. Link is bigger but that than so many other things. When they first started coming out with the research down here in the States, and they said, cholesterol's bad, so people stop eating eggs. And they said, obviously smoking was bad, but it's not really any one thing, but it's the combination of all those things. But what I've heard, I had a friend who was a nurse, and I remember she was helping with a surgery when the guy was having a heart attack, and they were doing that stuff. And when he was opened up, the zipper cut on the chest, she said when you could literally grab, there was an artery running by there. And when you grabbed the artery, she said it was so hard. It was unbelievable how stiff that was. And she had seen ones that weren't, it was just like, oh, wow.
yes,
And I guess it's just like night and day, the smoking, what it does to, all those things. But it's still a combination because there are Asian cultures that smoke like chimneys and they don't get heart attacks because, body type and the food they eat, right? A lot of fish, a lot of vegetables, with oils and blah, blah, blah. So it's a lot more complex than just saying it's just one thing, but the combination, if you're overweight, you drink, you're male, right? You get older. I mean, all those things are risk factors, and they do tend to, what do they call it? I call them, well, yeah, multiply or exponential. They just crazily go up, right?
yeah, they stack up against you. I mean, the thing with the hardening arteries, that's to some degree that is genetic. Like,
Yeah.
I have blue eyes, my dad had blue eyes. We both have arteries that harden,
Hmm.
so we got to be careful of that.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a straight answer on exactly which things are the most, damaging or highest risk factors,
Yeah.
but no one disagrees that smoking's bad. So my thing was I needed to quit smoking. And my
Right.
problem is twofold. One is you need willpower to do that. And if I'm drinking or if I'm, getting high a little bit, I lose my focus is not there. And I'll be like, oh, well, maybe I'll just have one
Yeah.
cigarette, and then the next thing, I'm back at it. So
Yeah.
that was part of it. And, my cardiologist was like, oh, yeah, well, if you want to have a glass of wine, no problem, or a beer, no problem. Or if you want to, even smoke a joint, that's fine. But I don't deal with nuance very well. Like I'm either doing it or not doing it.
Right.
And so I needed to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And so how did that get me to high jump? Well, here's the thing. I was, just having, listened to your podcast and been thinking about this. Part of what's happened is that my lifestyle has converted back to how it was when I was a little kid, right? Like from, 14 on, I was always kind of partying and stuff.
Right.
But when I was a little kid, I wasn't. And when so there's a bunch of things if you can remember back to yourself or anyone being a little kid. That's a certain kind of mindset. And I guess one of the things in that was, I remember this, doing high jump and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I thought, wouldn't that be a cool? So that planted the seed in my head that I might want to try to do that.
Awesome.
But it's a devil of a thing. I don't know. You have access to this stuff, but it's a devil of a thing to find the equipment and the place to do it
Oh, yeah.
as an adult, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like the schools don't want you there. They're like, don't, no, thanks. I don't want that liability. Some old guy coming around and
Right.
jumping and breaking his neck.
And there's not
And then
many clubs, not many athletic clubs there for track.
not so much for adults. There are plenty for kids.
Yeah.
And so I was deep, I was thinking about it and I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I had some plans about getting some mattresses and stupid stuff and
Right.
just building a setup like that. But that seemed dumb. And then I was thinking I have some friends who are teachers like yourself, and I thought maybe they could smuggle me in for a few jumps.
Right.
And so, anyways, then I finally found a track club, and um, I found that just this past August.
Wow.
And so then I was in business, and then I was like, okay, now I'm gonna actually have to learn. And I
Right.
was blown away. I was totally blown away by a number of things. One is how cool people were in that track and field, like club and vibe.
Yeah.
Just nice, like friendly, very, very chill, very modest, and like it's a crazy story. I go there, I'm there for like, I don't know, maybe I'm in my second week and I'm like being friendly and trying to learn stuff and meet this guy there and he looks like he's jumping pretty high and I was like, oh well, I'm this old guy, I'm trying to learn how to high jump again, so any tips, let me know. And he said, oh yeah, you work on the rhythm of your run up. So I've been thinking about that. Anyway, so then like a couple of weeks later I'm watching the world championships and I see this same guy and it's actually Piers Lepage, the guy who actually won the world championships a couple of years ago in decathlon.
Wow.
And he was there. He was like so mellow and like, not bragging or anything.
Yeah.
So that was cool. The
Right.
other thing, well, there's a bunch of things. Let me pause and give you a chance to.
No,
I'm going.
it's
I'm blabbing on.
I like the transition, from like you said, you simplifying, getting everything to drop down and becoming more like a kid again, right? So, my brain, when you went to Ironman triathlon mode, my brain went into another mode because you're 2 or 3 years behind. Like I said, doing the podcast, I have had, and it may have been a couple of years now, but you're going to come upon one where I have Brad Kearns on, and I don't know if you know what Brad Kearns is, but he was formerly a number 3 world ranked Ironman triathlete who is now in his 60s, and
Okay.
he has a wealth of stuff. You're going to see. I think you'll just love his stuff. He's got it's called BRAD, uh, the BRAD podcast. So that's him talking about everything you could think about: training, red light therapy for recovery, icing for recovery. Should you sprint? Should you run? Should you walk? What kind of weight workouts could you be doing? I mean, nutrition, it really champions high protein, a decent amount of fat and natural sugars, no processed foods whatsoever. So, and backs it up with research, and you can chase it down, vet him if you want. I'm like, I got tired of chasing it all down because it's pretty good stuff. But he is also like, I didn't know who he was. To be honest, when I remember when I saw Brad's stuff, I was just intrigued with him, and we started talking. And then it turned out that he was this Ironman triathlete, and he had all this stuff going on. He had his podcast, and he had his own nutrition channel. I mean, this guy. I had a chance to train him this summer for the first time. He wanted to work on the high jump because now he's picked up the high jump. He's done with the Ironman triathlon stuff, and he's
Wow.
transitioned to the place where he's like, all that mileage is insane. It's going to destroy your body in the long run, right? Blah, blah, blah. All the new research says, what's your favorite exercise? Walking. Walking's a great exercise. You can walk for 2, 3 miles. It'll do you more good than if you ran 2 or 3 miles. So go through all that. And then it turns out that he's now competing at the master's level in the high jump. So
Hmm.
if you go to some indoor meet or some outdoor meet where you and Brad cross paths, I was like, hey, Brad Kearns. So that was kind of where my brain went when you said Ironman triathlete. So shout out to Brad. I'm an affiliate of Brad's, and I have a promotion for him that I'll stick somewhere in the podcast. So again, you haven't heard any of those yet because I just started doing it. But that
Cool.
is an interesting thing because there's really a lot there. But then what you were talking about, training when you get to be, first of all, in your 60s, secondly, in an explosive sport. I don't think it's, and yeah, and you brought up something that was funny. You said when you watch yourself, when you feel yourself run, man, you feel fast, right? And when you come off the ground, you're like, boing, you're like, oh, that feels great. So there's times
Well,
I demonstrate to my kids, I go, hey, you're not doing your knee drive right. Okay, so watch this. I go, film me, and then I'll do it, and I make sure the bar is nice and low, like 4 feet, 4, 6, way down there. And I'm like, get your knee up over the bar. That's the one thing I know I can do because when I'm standing there, I'm taller than most of these bars. So I bring my knee up above the bar while I'm still standing on the ground. I go, if you can't get your knee up to here, then you should. I'm because a lot of them barely get their knee up and then they're throwing their heads back and trying to arch. I'm like, okay, let's teach you how to do a knee drive first. You're jumping right to phase 5. You're running up and going right to layup. I go, you need to run up, jump, kind of let it flow, and then hammer your position. You got to learn how to change the timing because as soon as they learn that habit, it's amazing, trying to get it out of them. So anyway, coming back to your thing with starting explosive training and being older, and it's like, well, how do you do that? It's the school of gradualism. You really got to be careful. Plyometrics, like you said, bounding up and down stairs. You got to watch your volume and you got to kind of stretch things out. Start with 2-footed jumps before you go to a lot of 1-footed jumps because 1-footed jumps are harder. You're carrying all your body weight on one limb instead of sharing the load, and jump in sand when you first start, like 2-inch jumps, start getting the flexibility and the range of motion and having a nice soft cushion, but you're stretching out your Achilles and, there's all kinds of, protocols and stuff out there. And again, I highly recommend, well, I wouldn't say highly because I know what to look for a lot of times, but there's just been a proliferation of trainers. There's everything is about power and explosiveness now. It doesn't matter what sport we're talking about. Basketball, you need to be powerful. You need to be able to accelerate quickly. You need to be able to change direction. You need to be able to jump up in the air and grab the ball from somebody else and pass it while you're still up in the air if you can. It's like everything's just boom. Football players are incredibly fast and agile athletes. Basketball, same. Volleyball, hockey, in all these sports there's nobody saying, just, take your time. Don't worry about catching that guy right away. It's like, no, you got to catch him now. Like,
yeah.
so it's all
Oh,
quick twitch,
absolutely.
like you're saying, explosive power. So it's like, how do you get that? You got to lift heavy weights. You got to change those muscles tendencies. You got to get some flexibility. You got to get range of motion. And like you said, I think our brains remember how to do the stuff and the body starts following along, but then the muscles are like, hey, wait a minute. Okay, this is a great idea, but you're asking for too much right now, and generally the guy up here is in control, the body just follows along, right? And then something
Sure.
like you were telling me earlier today, something pops, right? And you're just like, wait, what was that sound? Oh no, and I'm terrible at warming up. Sometimes I'll jog a lap while the kids are warming up, and other times I don't. And then I don't always do a lot of running around, and then sometimes I'll end up jumping over something for them, and I'm like, someday something's just gonna pop. I'm waiting for one of my patellar tendons or an ankle or something, so that's one reason to keep the bar low and run slow. But yeah, you bringing that up, man, there's a lot of things to do, and it depends. Like, when do you want to you know, this is where we can get into a whole area thing where you say programming. When how do you set up a periodized training program for you? And my first recommendation is pick a start date, pick an end date. Like, and if that end date is your, you know, you said, your territory is like the state, right? So if you're gonna have your territory championship or whatever, then maybe that was it. Maybe that's the date we pick. And you go, okay, what's the difference between now and then? How many days we got? And then you go, okay, I want to be able to do these things. And you start breaking it down. And you literally go week by week. You got to plan in your vacations. You know, you got to see how much, how many days a week do I want to train? You know, I'm 60. So I remember when I trained 5 and 6 days a week, and it didn't go well when I was 20, 22. 6 days a week was way too much. If I keep telling my kids this, my clients mostly are high school kids, but I tell them all, but I say, hey, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Back to the Future with Michael,
Sure.
right? What's his name? I want to say
Michael J. Fox.
Thank you, Michael J. Fox. I was thinking Alex P. Keaton, so that's why I went Michael.
Yes.
No, not Michael Keaton. Okay, yeah. So Michael J. Fox in that movie, when he goes back, he's told not to see your past self because all these weird things happen. But if I could go back in a time capsule kind of thing and tell my younger self the wisdom that I've learned as I've gotten older, it would literally be do half as much as you think you have to. Like, you do not have to train, especially in an explosive sport, all the time. You need to recover. You need to let the stuff that you did set. You need to let your neuromuscular system and the muscles rebuild all the inputs that you're putting in there, which your body is faithfully trying to follow your lead. You got to make sure you fed it right. You got to make sure it's rested, and you got to make sure that it has the time to do what it's supposed to do. And if you keep breaking it down while it's trying to build it up, you're just fighting yourself, and the progress is slower. So that and a 2 word, the other one I always say is I would tell myself 2 words when I was in my teens because I had really bad shin splints because we jumped all the time because we're stupid. And it was fun, but it was stupid. I would say 2 words: ice bath, ice bath, ice bath. It's just,
So you believe in the icing?
oh, yeah, I've
Yeah.
had that play out. I was taught by John Smith, who's one of the top sprint coaches in the world, who was the sprint coach when I was at UCLA. And he was just getting ready to start cranking out Olympic champions when he brought Mike Marsh and Danny Everett and had Kevin Young in the fold already and Steve Lewis and all these guys that turned into these incredible athletes on the US Olympic team, taught by John. One of the things I asked him, and I had already graduated, unfortunately, in '86, I was 22 years old and a senior. Kevin Young was just a sophomore, I think. Mike Marsh, Danny Everett, all those guys were freshmen. Steve Lewis hadn't even come to the school yet. So, he had this young group, incredibly talented, and then you've got a world-class athlete who's also a world-class coach coaching them. And I remember calling him after I had left, and he was gracious enough. I don't even remember. He must have given me his number at back time. This is back in the early '90s. And I remember saying, John, my shins and my knees are bugging me a little bit, and I've been training a lot. And he's like, hey, you need to start sitting from your hips down in cold water, ice cold water, as cold as you can stand. And I'm like, really? He goes, trust me, you're going to recover faster. He goes, it's like taking a fire hose to the lactic acid in your muscles. You will not regret it. He goes, as a matter of fact, you could actually double your workouts. And I'm like, nah, So that first time sitting in that ice bath, that 3 minutes of rocking, going, oh my gosh, this hurts so bad, and I was like, and then the blessed numbness. When that numbness steals over you and you're like, oh, and you just sit back and you go, okay, it's still pretty cold, but it's no longer painful because it's so cold you shut off all your nerve endings. So you're just sitting there in that blessed numbness, and I'm like going, oh, this is great. And then it's like 15, 20 minutes, and you're all sitting like, oh, I gotta get out of here. And when you get out of that, then you're sitting around being hypothermic for a while. And then, but I remember that I got done. He told me, he goes, don't get up and move around. Don't start testing your tissues or anything like that. Just let it set in. Let your body warm up again. And then take your time, but he goes, if you want to do another workout in the afternoon, you should try it out. And I remember when I went out to the track, I mean, I felt like $1 million. I felt like I hadn't even gotten up yet that morning. Everything felt great. And I actually started training for an indoor meet that at that time doing stupidly, I think still either 4 or 5 days a week training, but I wouldn't do more than an hour, and it would be sprints or plyos or weights. And then I literally planned out where I only practice high jumping like 1 out of every 10 days. So I had learned that
Mm.
for me to be explosive, I did not need to jump all the time because in a way, you're just stealing what you need. It's like I'm taking this ahead of time. I need to use this at a time when I really got to perform well. So I need adrenaline and power and all that explosiveness. But if on the way there, I keep practicing it. What is the term I came up for? I got to coin this term. I'm going to coin this now. So anybody listening, you can't steal this term. I call it razor dull. So
Yeah.
if you get a real sharp razor and you go, oh yeah, I really like this razor. This is great. And then you're like, oh yeah, this is a great razor. And like the next day you're like, I wonder if this razor is still sharp. Oh yeah, you use it again. Yep, still pretty sharp, and all of a sudden, through overuse, it starts getting clogged up and it's not shaving as fast and you're going through and you're like, yeah, this razor, it doesn't work the way that it used to. And it's like the analogy is simple, when you overuse it, it gets dull. And I told athlete, I said, you know what? I can teach you something new every day. You can start working on mastering movement patterns and this and that. But if we jump it in there all the time, I'm going to get you to the biggest meets of the year and you're going to be dead tired or broken. And there's no reason to do that. You're in an event, like you said, that takes 4 to 5 seconds, 7 if you got a really long, slow approach. And that's it. 40, 50 feet, 60 feet of running. You don't have to run 100-meter sprints. You don't have to run 200-meter sprints. What should you be training? I tell everybody, train like a basketball player. Just run short distances and jump up in the air, try to grab the rim. Fast, short bursts. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to run 100 meters and then try to jump. So, and you get a lot of argument. I guarantee you, I would get lashed back if, people are listening. They go, I think my coach said we need to run the hundreds. And okay, early in the season, all right, I'll give you that. You could run some hundreds. You could run some repeat intervals. And then there's other guys out there, Tony Holler, who's saying feed the cats principle, which is just sprint and then completely recover because for you training your body how to deal with being tired doesn't make sense for a high jumper. Because how am I going to get tired? The only time I get tired is if I'm the last guy at a certain height and I got to take 3 jumps in a row, right? So if all of a sudden everybody else is out and you're left, or for some reason there were 10 guys in, but you were the last guy and they worked their way through, and all of a sudden it's like that guy was out or he made it or whatever, and they still hadn't gotten to you, and then you start jumping and it's like you take a jump and there's nobody else. They're either all out or they're all waiting for the bar to go up. It's like, oh, you're up again. We'll give you a minute. But even then, you're not going to get tired. You're a high jumper. So why would I train myself to the point of I can't run as fast as I need to and I'm not as explosive as I should be and mess up all my wiring and my timing because I don't have that snap. So it's a really fine edge. There are times when it's kind of like Zen, almost like you're saying, where you're so tired that maybe you forget something that's a problem, like you're doing the wrong thing, thinking about it too much, and now you're just so tired that I've heard stories that the Russians used to just train heavy lifting and heavy plyos first and then jump when they were so tired that they're like, if I don't do the right technique, I won't be able to get off the ground, because I
Yeah,
don't
there was something in
focus.
triathlon training, like distance, like in running and even in swimming, that gets like that. You get so your stroke in swimming after swimming a long time gets very, very efficient. Like
Mhm.
your brain just kind of finds the way to do it that takes the least energy in distance. Now,
Get it
that's
through
distance.
control, yeah. Kind
But
of.
what you say makes total sense, and I don't know if it's any um, of any interest. When I started looked at this back in August and I found this place, I was scouring the internet for, training programs and exactly as you say. And I found one. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on Instagram of people jumping, and I'm all over that. I love that stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And you pick up these pearls. But I was looking for a program, and I found one. The only trouble was it was for a collegiate athlete, someone who's probably like in their early 20s.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, well, whatever. I'm a pretty tough guy. I can do this. And I've got my muscle up. So, I'll be fine. So I went in and I followed the program, and then what I did, I even made the mistake of not I did more than the program, just
Wow.
like a complete idiot, right? I was so excited. I think I was overexcited. I don't know what the heck, but it was like, take 3 jumps, and there I was on my 10th jump.
Right.
And like you said, I had this is in the first couple of weeks, and it was just such a drag because I went up and bizarrely, not the takeoff foot, but the penultimate foot or leg popped. I got in the air and I heard this popping sound, and it was the calf muscle tearing.
Wow.
And so that was just, I had to go back to the drawing board. I couldn't walk for like 3 weeks. And anyway, so what I did is I thought, well, we'll put the collegiate program on pause. And I went to ChatGPT, which was actually, for someone who has no real contact with that, with your world. And I hadn't discovered you yet, so I didn't know about all this wisdom. ChatGPT was surprisingly good. So, and came up with first a rehab program for my calf muscle, which worked and took me through all sorts of stuff like sand as well,
Hmm.
and gave me set goals. Like I had to be able to do heel raises and for 30 seconds and
Right.
do
Right.
this crazy stuff where you stand on one leg. This is bizarre. Just try to stand on one leg with your eyes shut. I don't know if
Hmm.
have you ever done that?
No.
This is ridiculously difficult. Like I don't know if it's just me, but like see if you can do 30 seconds next sometime. And
On over.
it's
Yeah.
meant to create those neural connections. Anyway, so I got through the 6 weeks of rehab, and then I asked it to come up with a program for training to get ready to high jump again. And it's a really good program. I'm on the 4th week now. This is a pullback rest kind of week, but
Right.
basically it's kind of a sequence of warm up, and I got a kind of a serious warm up now from the calisthenics anyways, and then some sprints drills like A skips and that kind of stuff, and just getting loose and I'm always like picking up things at this track because there's all these
Right.
real athletes doing stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, I should do some of that. That looks amazing.
Right.
So I put that
Purple.
in, and then the plyometrics next, then the event specific stuff, and I decided, and maybe I get your opinion on this. I decided to focus first on run up
Hmm.
because it's the first thing, and just get that solid. And so I'm trying to get figured out the arc and the math and the arc
Right. I tell you
and the
what, it sounds to
lean.
me your instincts are pretty good because I've broken it down into 5 phases and I call it straight, curve, takeoff, flight, layout, right? Boom, 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 boom. High jump is very sequential. You cannot skip any phases. You're running this path and you do what you do. The most basic and the most important thing that I think I'm learning more and more as I'm getting older is posture during the approach so that you can be in the right position to take off. And that position is tilted back and away from the bar with your shoulders tilted like you're an airplane making a bank turn away from the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
It creates 3 different leans. It creates the lean back lean that a guy would get if he was long jumping. It gets the tilt back and a little bit to the left simply by the angle you're hitting at the bar, and then you get that sideways tilt with the airplane due to the speed of the curve, and all of a sudden you got a 3-dimensional lean. But you have to be as tall as you can be. Like if this now we're talking dream scenarios. If I was going to train an athlete, I would probably go over and say, Lord, have me be born in Russia. Because what do the Russians do that to me is revolutionary is they took a lot of their athletes back in the day you used to hear this all the time when, when you and I were watching the Olympics when we were kids, and they would show these Russian athletes, like the gymnasts, Olga Korbut, and I can't remember the other one. I remember, oh,
Nadia
almost
Comaneci, but
Tatiana, something else. And for the first couple times I saw them, and then of course it went away from the Russians and it became the Romanians. But you're like, the Russians would train their athletes with classical ballet first. They would learn how to
mm,
stretch, and they would learn all the stuff like that. And these were the shot putters, everybody were, oh, it's good for you. You must go and do the ballet, point the toes. And, so you're like, but they did that. And so I love that. I'm like, I want you when you're running, if you're 6'2", but you're hunched over, you should be up here. You should be very vertical. One of my favorite guys to watch, and you mentioned his name earlier, Dwight Stones was one of the most tall, stick-like guys when he ran. He was not hunched over. He was very good posture. Dwight's 6'6" and was,
mm,
maybe a
wow,
buck 65 or something. He has a stick. And he would maximize the heck out of that. There wasn't never any bad posture, never hunched over. Dwight was not the fastest or the most explosive athlete. He was just really in a good position. He would be just, and you watch these demonstration videos. Like, you ever seen the Japanese guy throwing the stick at the
I
ground,
have, yes,
bounces up and over, like Stephen Holm?
yes,
Look at that angle. That's what we're talking about. That's where your
yeah,
body needs to be. So it's like, but inside of there, if I throw a little 4-inch stick at the ground and it hits and bounces over, what about a 7-inch stick or a 12-inch stick or a 7-foot long stick? And you throw that at the ground and watch it hit. So who has a bigger advantage? Oh, the bigger stick, the taller stick, even though it's leaning back and it's closer to the ground. Overall, once it hits and spins up, that center mass is already higher than somebody else, right? So I'm training all the time taller. And if you can, and this is the hard part, if you can be leaning back and to the left or back and to the right already as you start your curve. If you can already be leaning back, and it is not easy because it's much easier to sprint with the cart in front of you. That's one thing I learned listening to John Smith and the people talking about, you drop and you push, right? It's explosive bounding from foot to foot, but you're driving something in front of you, almost like you're pushing a shopping cart. You don't want to stand up and pull because our hamstrings aren't as strong as our quads. So you got this explosive jumping mechanism between your quads and your glutes. Your hamstrings are kind of like they're there and they're to help you recover to pull that leg around. But if you start leaning back, then all of a sudden those hamstrings become more important. And I love this proliferation in the last couple of years of the Nord stick. I don't know if you've seen that product, but anytime you're on your knees and someone's behind you holding your feet and you fall forward, right? Like you're
oh,
gonna
yeah, like a Nordic
yeah, the Nordic. So they got
curl.
this thing called the Nordic curl, but this is called the Nord stick, where you're on this platform that'll shift, and you can start with just really basic angles and then get more and more. Great
Okay.
gradualistic system of training, right? So, but the hamstrings become more important. But anyway, I saw this video, and it's so funny because I was telling my kids, I just started preaching. I'm like, I'm convinced, I don't care. I'm just going to trust my gut on this and go with it. And then it was it was like God said, "You want to know if you're right? I think you're right." So of course God would know who was right because he's invented all. But here's this guy from the Soviet Union, from the Ukraine, Oleg Dereshuk or something. I forget the guy's name, but he shows a 4-sequence jump thing on Instagram: 190, 2 meters, 210, 220. Simple, right? 10 centimeter jumps, which are big. But he goes, 190 is like 6'2" and 3/4. 2 meters is 6'6" and 3/4. 210 is 6'10" and 3/4. And 220 is 7'2.5". Every jump looked the same. And as the camera came on, you didn't see the whole thing, but you would see him at the start of the curve, the last 5, already leaning back as he's
Really?
hauling the male forward. And it's hard to tell because he's so tall. It's really hard. One thing it's difficult for somebody watching a really tall athlete run is it's very difficult to see them as moving very fast because their legs are so long. So when you're taking
Right.
really long and loping strides, They don't always look like they're moving that fast, but if you watch a 400-meter runner that's got those long legs, taking those long bounding strides, and they're going around the track in 45 seconds, four world-class 100 meters back to back to back, right? To back, and you're watching them run, like, oh yeah, stride length's important, right? So you see this high cycling action, and this guy's he's already leaning back and he's still accelerating through the curve and hitting this. And I'm like, oh, this is it. And then it's just like, and it hits, and it's that same video. It's like here and thump, and then it's like air, just this easy air where he's just up and spin, and he just kind of leans back a little bit, pops his hips. He doesn't need to do much, because all the work is being done in the approach. And that thing that the guy told you, the decathlete that you met at your club, which is so cool, like you said, that he talked to you. The rhythm is everything. The rhythm at the end is like boom. I tell everyone, I've been calling this, I'm naming this now, the crescendo effect. The crescendo effect, in my estimation, is every step keeps getting faster. Every step keeps getting a little bit longer because I want to have my body tilted way back behind that foot so that it can stop me and let me swing up to vertical. If I'm too tall, right, too forward, too straight up and down, when I put my foot on the ground, my upper body just blows right through. Momentum will not allow you to do what you've got to do. So I'm like, I want you to be cycling, knees up, feet to your butt, big wheels. I want that to be at its peak right when that last foot hits the ground. I want that to be the longest step. I want it to be the fastest step. I want it to have the deepest angle possible. Like everything is at its max. And that's right then when that foot hits the ground, the most important part is that knee coming up right through there, the next step, which is really the next step of the approach or whatever it turns into your knee drive. And that should be the most explosive up and across, do all your stuff. So I'm like, what you're talking about first is like, how do we get to all that? We got to start running, and we got to start running properly, which is, again, tall, really, really tall. If you're a shuffler, what I call shufflers or draggers, or even power bounders, you can do that at the start. When you're running, you can shuffle your feet if you want, and you can kind of do like triple jump bounding, like long reaching steps. But once you get on the curve, man, you got to go. And even Sotomayor and Derek Druin, a Canadian that you should be a big fan of, right? If you watch Derek Druin when he was in the Olympics, and I love that 2016 showdown because I've never seen Barshim get spanked like that. And it was like, and Bondarenko was like an afterthought, and Druin never missed until it was over. It was just like he was on. You could tell from jump one. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's flying. And he was doing that power bound start, right? Boom, 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 boom. And there's these long explosive strides, bam, 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 bam. And he's moving. For someone who's not really sprinting, he's moving. But when he got on that curve, man, then it was just high wheels and lean back and bam, you could see it's just like boom, 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 boom. And he's like, bam, and he's off. And I'm like, that's the crescendo effect. Everything is building up to that moment. The stride pattern, the length, the acceleration, the lean, all of it. Boom, right at that last second. But you can't do all of that unless you learn how to run and cycle. So what you're saying has a lot of wisdom. You have to, have to, have to. And I think it's super smart in so many ways. And we're just impatient. All my jumpers want to jump. They want to jump, because it's tough and you want to try to push yourself. But what is the thing? You can't PR every day. If you PR every day, all of a sudden everybody's breaking the world record. You can only do what you can do. So everybody wants to get better in too fast. I'm like, look, let's just run through. Let's get you in the right spot with the right rhythm, and you can repeat it over and over and over. Because as the bar goes up, I'm going to have you pull farther and farther away from the bar and start getting longer and longer strides and getting faster and faster. And you kind of have to learn that pattern. You can't just jump right in there at your opening height and be flying through there. You could, but why work that hard? Kind of getting on a roll. Now you don't want to take 20 jumps either, right? But I'm like you. I'm like, hey, let's run through a lot. Let's get sometimes I put the standards up and take the pits away and just say, let's just run and go boom, 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 and then attack. And I'll have a cone or something over here going, this is the back, corner of the pit. I want you to run right through there to 45, lean back, and then maybe pop up and put the bar up at like 8 feet or something. So it's not in the way. You're not worried about hitting your head on it or ducking under. It's like, no, jump up and see if you can even touch the bar or hit with your armpit or something, But the rhythm and the way it looks are just as important. And you can only if you jump every time you do one of those, you're gonna have a short workout. You can't do, I would say, 8 full approach jumps in a practice is too much. But
Yeah.
I can do a lot of full approach run throughs without the explosive finish. And turn that into one of your running days instead of.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I've been trying to do. I mean, maybe just point of clarification
Mhm.
with your run up. So I get that you want to, I get the curve part, like intellectually, I get it. I got to train my body to actually do it. Um, and I get the idea that you want to be accelerating as best you can within control, right? Like it's,
Absolutely. Yeah.
get
Too
better and
fast
better.
is if you can't control it, it's not going to help you. Yeah.
But the thing that got me a little confused is the stride length actually increasing?
It
You
should.
said
Good. Yeah.
really? Because I kind of
Well,
had some idea that it was like boom, 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 and it was the last two were a little maybe shorter. But
absolutely.
you're saying no.
All you're saying is true. So here's the reason behind that, George. It's a great question. I teach this all the time because I learned this in kinesiology. I had already been high jumping for a while, but my major at UCLA was kinesiology, the study of human movement, right? So one of the courses I took, and this is ancient, this is back in the 80s. So we don't have computers. The whole reason I took kinesiology was I saw something about a computer program analyzing someone hitting a volleyball, and they were like a stick figure green on a black background, like the old DOS computer stuff. And that
Oh
was
yeah.
fascinating to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at the stick figure. I can see it swinging. I'm picturing the elbow coming over the top. I'm like, that looks cool. That's what I want to do. So when I went to college, they're like, what are you thinking about doing? And they said, well, we have a kinesiology thing. It'd be excellent for me. I'm like, yes, I want to do that. So, but we didn't have that. We would put a big piece of white paper on the wall and then shine the picture at it. And then you would watch the video where someone's running by, and you would take a pen or something and hit all the joint markers, the elbow, the wrist, the knee, right? And you would
Okay. Cool.
track the circles as they ran by, right? So that's how you start learning about that. And then someone came up and said, hey, when these guys are running, the formula for horizontal velocity is really simple. Stride length times stride rate. So if you and I are both running, right? Say, okay, and we're matching strides perfectly. We're in rhythm. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Take 10 steps. You go, okay. If I'm taking my steps are 1 inch longer than yours and we are completely synced up, who's running faster?
You are.
I am, because I just went 10,
Yes.
10 inches farther than you did in the same amount of time with the same turnover. So stride length is one aspect of how you get max speed. Stride rate is the other. So again, if you and I are matched on stride length now, and then I say, I got to beat George here. So what do I got to do? I got to pick up my rate. I've got to turn over faster so that I'm taking more strides per second than you are because we have the same stride length. If you plug it in that way, so you go, okay, so stride length and stride rate are both equally important. And there's a certain length that you can get to where you're overstriding and your turnover drops down and you're not going to be as fast. You might have an outrageously long stride length, but you can't deal with it, right? But you can go the other way. What if I get super short and choppy and I can have this outrageously fast turnover? I call it running in place. It's like the guy where his legs are going like this on a cartoon and then he takes off. It's like, but when you're running to the bar, a lot of guys get that little, they get choppy. And so I go, you're fooling yourself. You think you're moving faster. You are moving quickly. You are firing your muscles quickly, but the
Right.
stride is so short that you're actually decelerating as you get to the bar. You think you're
Which
getting
you don't want to do.
you don't want to decelerate. So the
No.
whole thing I'm talking about, and I'm not saying a radical increase in stride length, but the first thing is it depends on your style. If I'm standing there and I'm a typical American power jumper, and I saw a typical American power jumper is the double arm, boom. That was classic American paradigm. When I first started watching the high jump, Fosbury was an outlier. And Fosbury, the Fosbury takeoff that he did happens 1 out of every 10,000 jumpers that I've worked with. You almost never see someone run up and do it like that because it's not abnormal. It's just a different style. And I tried it. I've tried every style that there is. And when I was in really good shape, when I would try that, I couldn't get off the ground with it because it was only one lifter. It's one arm going up with the knee drive. I needed two arms because it's a little bit heavier. So he was tall and really skinny, really light and fast, and that worked for him. It was like almost a long jump takeoff, right? So anyway, I got sidetracked. We were talking about the stride length and the stride rate. So you want to get, if you're standing there at zero, right? Standing there, they're rocking back and forth, they're doing their thing, right? My stride length is at zero and my turnover is at zero. And here I go. Okay. As you're going, both of those variables should be shooting up. I should be getting quicker and I should be stretching out my stride length as I go to a point. Now, how many steps are in a real high jump approach? As few as 6 and 7, depending on how you start, and as big as 14. I've seen old Brandon Stark videos, a guy from Australia, 16 standing. Now he's down to 14. But like 10 years ago, he used to have a 16-step approach, which was an 11-step straightaway and a 5-step curve. And he's outrageously good. He's been to 3 Olympics in a row. And then Barshim had 7, but Barshim would run into the start, right? He'd be run, skip, hop, find his spot, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I like the shorter approaches because I think there's less they could go wrong in 7 steps. If I'm making a systematic error somewhere in my approach on a 14 step, I think you can get into a really bad spot one way or the other, too far out, too close. But again, Brandon Stark runs that thing all the time. You watch his feed, you see him doing a long approach run throughs. A lot of these ideas I have about popping up into the pit, I'm stealing directly from Brandon Stark. I go, oh, that's a great drill. First time you see it, I'm like, oh, I got to do that. That looks awesome. And it is. So you're like, yeah, we got to run through, at high speed, really tall. Watch Brandon's. I've got videos of all the elites, Bondarenko, Druin, Stark, all these guys. Knees are always as high as their hips, and their feet are kicking in the butt, and they're swinging their arms, and they are moving. And I'm telling you, you don't see a lot of short. There's a few. Stefan Holm, that Ivanyuk from the Soviet Union is only 5'11". He's jumped 7'9". There's some shorter guys that maximize their speed, hit great angles, and do that. And I'm amazed by them. But the tall, skinny guys that are fast, it almost looks too easy. It's just like, but the things are the mechanics, and you watch the turnover and all that stuff. But it's same thing you're talking about. It's boom, 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 right? Boom. Inside of that last step, yeah, the last one's a tiny bit shorter. So I would put in my new notes that I'm making on my high jump checklist 2.0. Yes, the penultimate is shorter than the ultimate step, and it might actually be a little bit shorter than the third step, right? If we go 3, 2, 1, it's going to be long, a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, but they're all still accelerating through there. And that's in a real art form, what you're talking about, that penultimate, how to do that. I have a great video that I was fortunate enough to get, and shout out to Jeremy Fisher at the Chula Vista Training Center here in not in Los Angeles, San Diego, but Southern California. He came and we did a high jump essentials of high jump clinic last year with 2 Olympians. Jeremy, who'd made it to the trials, my old coach, Alan Hankel, who's coached Olympians, and Kevin, who has also coached Olympians. We had this unbelievable team of people, and I got to listen to Jeremy teach that penultimate step and drills to do.
Fantastic.
It's off the charts.
Because back in 2022, where I still am, and Back to the Future of Raise the Bar, that was something that you had talked about wanting to do, having a symposium. So that's amazing that you had it.
Yeah, it actually
sounds like it was great.
I would love to take credit for
when
it.
you're sprinting, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
When you're talking about sprinting, I'm assuming you're talking about when you're at max velocity sprinting, like not the start where you're kind of pushing back and you're low, but when you're like striding and it's like you're just trying to hold that max velocity. So that's sort of clarification 1. Clarification 2 is and this is maybe a sprinting question, but I kind of think of my feet going down when things are working out properly. My feet are being placed right underneath my body,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So what's creating the frequency and the length is how long that cycle in the air is.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yes. So you,
So, because your feet aren't stretching, like your feet aren't placed in front of your body, they're always placed underneath your body,
yes. Yes.
right?
That's
So
right.
there's a time thing, I guess, going on
Hmm.
of how long you're in the air and how quickly, like you said, your legs are moving while you're in the air.
Right. That's what we call recovery. So that's the key part that you're talking about. Bringing the knees up along with your feet kicking your butt is what stretches your strides out. If when I push off and I explode into that step, right? Like you're saying, my foot is right underneath me and my leg is coiled up and it just explosively extends and jumps forward, basically. Like I said, sprinting is really jumping forward from foot to foot, but fluidly. So your explosive move, my toe points, right? Everything's straight, bam. And then the other knee came up and the arm came up, right? And I'm in that zigzag position. Now, this foot that is just now leaving the ground needs to cycle out in front of me again, otherwise, I won't be able to take another step. I might be able to
Right.
get this one to go, but then this guy's going to be hanging back. So as soon as I toe off, I got to bring it up and around. If I don't bother to pull with my hamstring and get my heel to come up towards my butt, I'll drag that leg through. And when I do that, it's going to be shorter. And if I,
Okay, I think I got a nice analogy for you because I've been trying to understand this. I'm thinking of the leg. So think of the legs as a wheel,
yes,
okay? So when you take your step, and there's
like,
two things that are going to make that wheel faster. One is if it's a bigger wheel, which
yes,
is kind of like your length, right? Bigger wheels move
absolutely.
faster. And
Absolutely.
two is how fast that wheel is moving.
Yep.
So by getting your strides, like you said, long, you're making a bigger wheel,
Yes.
right? And then by getting the power to, and the muscles to make that wheel move faster, you're getting your frequency up,
And
right?
that to me is could possibly be the best way I've ever heard that explained, George. I'm gonna steal that for you and put my name on it. No, I'm gonna give
No,
you
do.
full credit,
Please
of
do.
course. I love that. I think that's one of the best analogies I've ever heard. Now, I use that term cycling for that reason, right? If
Yeah, well, that's what made me think of it.
if I had somebody run by and at night in a black ninja suit and I put little white markers on his elbows and his knees and his ankles and all the joints, right? And you watch him run by, if you put the one on the ankle joint, watched it, it would be doing that. It would look like a
It
wheel.
would look like a wheel.
Now, if it was a small wheel, then I would know that they're not pulling their foot up towards their butt. And I'd also know that they weren't picking their knees up very high and that that wheel was very small. The smaller the wheel, the smaller the stride length, the lower the speed. Unless that tiny little wheel is really moving fast, like
Yeah,
an
like a
terminal
road
wheel.
runner.
But you're, like I said, there's a happy medium between the two. But again, for the most part, in a shorter approach of 10 steps, I don't think either one is going to get to its max. And to be quite realistic, for a double armor, really high speeds are hard to deal with because somebody who's running with both arms opposing as they're sprinting has to change everything and get their arms together and get them to work together to go up. And that does not happen when you're sprinting. Now, the single armor can go here, 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 and let that arm go and not lose the flow of the sprint, which is why, the single armors, I say they're not power because they're not driving both arms up. One arm is just going up. And as their foot
Right.
hits the ground, that arm's lots of times already overhead and it makes them taller and faster, but they're not getting the same amount of power out of the lifters. Like if I drive both arms and my knee up, then I'm probably not moving as fast. Now, Barshim was a hybrid. I think Barshim was one of the fastest double armors that I'd seen. And some people would argue and say Druin was a double armor, but I think Druin was faking everybody out because when I broke down his technique, he would gather and swing his arms back and switch to a single. So I'm like, I don't know why he's bothering to gather. And maybe he did originally do the double arm and somewhere it just got lost in translation with higher speed or something. But he was essentially a single armor with a kind of a little hitch, but for me, when I gathered my arms together, I was driving both arms back and driving them up. But yeah, the speed is really the huge thing now. So this we'll tie this together, and we're gonna have you back on, but we're already creeping up over. So this is fantastic. The speed of the approach. Okay, we've got it becomes important for this reason. It has nothing to do with the speed. Speed's incredible for all the things we just talked about. We talked about power and how explosive all these athletes are in all these different sports and how it's required. Tennis, tennis requires explosive acceleration in different. I got to be able to change direction quickly and sprint, stop, and change direction again. So there's all these things. Well, we don't have that. There's nothing required in that high jump. I'm on a very set course. I don't have to stop and change directions. I want to just maximize this whole thing, right? So I need speed. What? We said more power. Okay, so let's take our acceleration formula, which was stride rate, stride length equals an increase in velocity. That's the key term. We need to have high velocity. Why? What's the power formula in physics? In physics, power equals force times velocity. Okay, so power output equals the amount of force that I'm producing at the speed that I'm moving. Okay, so there's a force velocity curve that people learn about for power, where if you or I is standing in the weight room and you put 1,000 pounds on a bar, and if for somehow I can pick it up, let's say I can do a 1 inch quarter squat where I can pick up 1,000 pounds. If I start to drop down to the ground, I'm going to just drop. Right now, if I can really resist, I might be able to resist for a while, but I'm going to go down. I'm not going to be able to get back up with 1,000 pounds on my back. So the muscle is moving at a very slow speed. Now I can put out a tremendous amount of force, but the power output is surprisingly low because I'm multiplying the force by a very small velocity number. Okay.
Right.
Now, if I have a higher velocity, most likely I'm not going to have a big heavy weight because big heavy things don't move that fast. They might move kind of fast, but they're not going to move really fast. Like a bullet has a lot of we're talking about momentum instead of power. But if you took a bullet and said how much power is in a bullet, you go, well, it's a tiny little bullet. Why is that little bit of force? Well, what's the biggest component of the force is that velocity that you shoot a bullet at, even though it's got a tiny little bit of mass, right? So when I'm moving, power is force times velocity. My little Romanian coach, Baru Elias, God bless him, he left us a few years back. He was one of the best that I've been around at teaching all the jumps, high, long, and triple. And he just preached cycling. And he would, oh, my brain shut off in the middle of the story. The force velocity.
Force
He would
velocity.
tell me, he would go for power. He didn't say power. He said, but it just used to stick in people, like all the things Elias said. He said to me, when in doubt, and when were you in doubt? Third attempt, right? 2 misses. When in doubt, run faster. It's like, hello. Lots of times people just la 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 boom. It's like, it was okay, right? You didn't make it. What do I do? You need to go a little bit faster. La 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 la. No, still no good. Well, what do? Dude, ramp it up. So it's like, why? Well, if I'm producing a certain amount of force, my sophomore year at UCLA, I could do full squats with 400 pounds. I had a decent amount of force production in my legs. But if I speed it up with that same amount of force production, I therefore have more power. To me, it's that simple idea, like we're talking about. If I've got two variables in this formula, power equals force times velocity. If the force remains the same, that's me, I'm going to remain pretty much the same, but I'm moving faster, my power output has just gone up. Simple formula. I'm not going to get any stronger. I can't get in the weight room in the middle of the competition and exert more force. Maybe I can try to stomp on the ground harder, but if I'm slowing down to do that, I'm suffering on the other variable. I start playing with the power and I start dropping the speed, right? Or I start playing with the force and dropping the velocity. So it's power equals force times velocity. So I'm saying you're probably going to keep your force output about the same. But how do I get an easy increase in power? Get on it, get moving,
Get
fast,
faster.
and
Yeah, I
fast.
mean, it's a fascinating sport. I mean, I never knew back when I was 18 that there was like my career was actually in mathematics.
Mhm.
So the bizarre thing, so I love this stuff, right? I mean, I'm now it's like, man, can I calculate that? Can I think about these curves and this whole like rotational forces in the air? And it's like such a hyper technical sport. When
Right.
I was doing this as a teenager, I had no idea,
No
like
idea.
none
Yeah.
of that. And
Right.
like A, I didn't train with B, I didn't even think about the math of it.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, and that velocity is both horizontal and then being converted and rotated into vertical velocity,
Yes.
which has its
Absolutely.
own, you know, equations that would involve, how heavy you are.
The
And
stride length
and
comes in there. Getting that stride out in front of you, like you're saying, I need to be able to stop the train and change the direction because if I don't, if I put it down too short under me, I'm still going to be a sprinter. I'm going to run right over that foot and I'm not going to be able to stop, especially when most of my momentum is going towards the pit. I don't want to get into the pit. I want to go up. So if I'm going to go up, I
right,
need to get that foot out in front of me and lean back away from it so I can have time to get my knee drive to come around and my arms to finish going up before I get pulled across by the force of my speed into the pit. So I always tell the kids, I go, there's a guy that lives in the middle of the pit. His name is Mr. Momentum. And I said, every jump you go over to party with him. You're just going to end up at
yeah,
Mr. Bo's party because everybody ends up in the pit. If you take off from the wrong spot, you might miss, fly out of the pit or whatever. But once you get past a certain level, that doesn't happen. Although I have told the kids every single mistake that I have told you to avoid, I have done. So I've hit the head with my standard, did it my freshman year, first home meet, was so excited, had no idea that I was too close to the standard. And it never happened to me in high school, not once. And I jumped over the standard on the first jump. I opened at 2 meters and jumped over the standard, had no idea that I was anywhere too close to the bar because I jumped over the standard. And then the bar went up to 205. And at 205, I hit my head on the top of the standard because I was too close, really bad angle. You could see it on film.
wow,
I'm just out of my mind, so stoked to be at my first home meet at UCLA and was just giddy with, whatever, and was not paying attention to details. So I did that. And then I remember in high school one time, they gave us not enough width on our turns at the Tustin relays. And instead of my 20-foot wide curve, which was very wide for most, and probably for me too, but I didn't know any better. And so they had only like maybe 15 feet. So I'm over here feeling like I'm all cramped. And so I didn't change anything. I ran the same turn. And instead of being by this standard, I was closer to the middle of the bar. And when I went taking off in the middle of the bar, I just flew out of the pit. I just went
ooh,
out the far end, And so my shoulder hit the tiny bit of the mat that I hit, and the rest of me just went wham, right on the ground. And I remember laying there going, oh gosh, I'm like, okay, I cannot take off from there. The one thing I can say about those particular things was that I learned my lesson on the very first time and immediately made a change because I go, I cannot land like this every time. So taking off in the middle is out. Taking off too close to that standard is out. So those were two mistakes that I was happy not to repeat. The other one was being too close to the bar. You're right next to the bar at takeoff, you knock it off on the way up and then you land on it. Landing on the bar, as everybody knows, in the middle of your back is never fun. And I'm just like,
mm-hmm,
and I tell them ahead of time, I go, you have to, the elites. I listened to Jeremy preach that also at this same conference, which, Elias taught me, and I've been teaching my jumpers for years, which is every time the bar goes up, get farther away from it. Because you're going to keep getting faster, you need more room and more time, to do what you got to do. So, dude, we could talk high
wow.
jumping all night, right?
Pardon me?
I said we could talk high jumping all night. It's fun.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I got an endless series of questions for you.
No,
I
and I
mean, I'll
love.
leave you with one last sort of thought as an aging,
Mhm.
athlete. There seems to be like there's a few things that must be different, like feel different. Okay. So if I was training a 20-year-old, if I was training my 20-year-old self, I would be very patient, right? Because you're going to be young for a while. You're just going to get better. And if you
Right.
take it slow, that's great. But as you get older, you kind of like, hey, it's this, the runway's got a limit at the end somewhere. So
Yeah.
you kind of got to get things done, but you don't want to go too fast, right? So finding that's one thing I kind of wrestle with is you know, there is an end, right? So you have to,
Well,
you
you
have
can
to
pick
focus
everything
on
up as you
and making sure
go.
you're getting things going.
Yeah, I think the wisdom is, just start slow and let yourself build up. I've been preaching this for a while, just as far as warm up goes. Like you said, jog around, do what you got to do. So, I mean, just watch and things. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And what I mean by that is, if you went and watched baseball players warming up still, what do? They take out a ball. They both got their glove. If you got two outfielders, they might start 5 feet apart and start flipping the ball back and forth. You know,
Hmm.
oh man, oh yeah, a tough weight workout yesterday. Start doing this, and then 5 feet, and then they both take a step back. 10 feet apart. And then they both take a step back. And as soon as it gets too easy, they step back. Pretty soon you're throwing 35, 45 feet. They're starting to throw real. You can hear the ball moving. Some of those guys got cannons. But you don't start doing that. Your body's got to warm up. So the same principle goes in with everything else. If you warm up that way, you should probably compete that way. You don't want to come right out and just run full blast. I tell people the same thing, that have a muscle strain like you did, or a muscle injury, or they're just like, man, my hamstring feels tight, right? I'm like, what's my advice? Oh, okay, ready? Go as fast as you can. Pow! Oh, there he goes. No. What do you tell him? You go jog 2 laps, get really, really sweaty. You had a good workout the other day. Okay. Now, no static stretches. Let's start moving, but slowly. Do your A skips. Walk the A skip. Don't even do it full speed first. Walk it.
Hmm.
Walk it through. Everybody's into Tai Chi right now. Why? It's motor patterns. It's easier to do things slower and perfect. Get the technique right at slow speeds before you start amping it up, because when you start giving a lot of muscle energy to it, if it's offline, you can't control it. I was like, okay, just ease your way into it. And then, if that same principle works with, running, lifting, boom, 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 then competing, same thing. Everybody warms up. I'm sure Steph Curry doesn't start shooting 45-foot jump shots right away, right when he walks out there. You
Sure.
know, you got to warm up first. You watch, what do they do first in basketball? They run and do the layup drill, right? And then they start shooting the 4-foot bank shots. And, eventually everybody gets that, and then everybody's cranking it away from three because the game's changed. But the warm up's still pretty much the same. And watch those football players. They're getting out to play football now like 3 hours before game time. Those guys are jogging around, they're skipping, they're doing drills, or they might be using elastic bands, working on mobility stuff. It's like it's
Sure.
changed, but the idea is still, hey, let's slowly ramp this up. I don't want to start kicking out high energy output 3 hours before the game. I'm gonna run out of juice, right? So it's like,
Right.
you
So
gotta
would you say that applies both within the workout as well as within
overall, yeah, the
a
whole
training
protocol.
cycle?
Sure. Yeah, you don't, what are you going to do? You can't start training in your first cycle with super fast explosive stuff. You want to ease your way into that. And when do
Right.
you need to be explosive? At the end of the program. That would be nice. So let's slowly ramp up to that. And inside of there, you build up those protocols where, the key is, we can talk about this at length another time, but it's always of volume problem. So at high intensities, your volume needs to be less. At mid-range intensities, your volume of reps, number of reps can be a little bit higher. At very low intensities, you can have lots of reps. You
Right.
can walk through, you can run through, but as long as you're not really getting after it, and as the higher everything ramps up, the less of those you take, because you can't take that many. And if you do, you'll burn out.
Do
And
you
you and
recommend using those bouncing boards that I've seen in videos where
I don't like
you do
the
the run up
bouncing
and
ones.
then
I like ramps more than I like the bouncers. I think I
okay.
haven't really seen that, and I can't really say religiously one way or the other. I would have to be shown, um,
Yeah,
some
I
of
don't really know what I'm talking about, but the idea seems to be that it softens the impact on your foot so
that
that
that I could see.
and
But
maybe gets you higher so that you can
confidence to the one thing I do like about, and I'll say that about any ramp, is getting you more airtime gives you time to work on your layout positions that you
mm,
don't excuse me, that you don't necessarily have to work very hard for. So if I'm you, we want to work on layout, but we're tired, and sometimes the pits are really high. If you have high foam pits, it's hard to throw your head back and hold that position very long as you actually stick your head in the mat, right? So what a lot of guys do is get the boxes out, raise those up so I can get, even with a higher bar, it doesn't really matter. If I move the bar up, the ground up 2 feet, I might as well move the bar up 2 feet and still work on the same thing, but I don't have to worry about sticking my head in the mat, So same thing off of a full approach. If you've got a
Okay.
really good ramp, you can start putting the bar up at heights that you probably wouldn't get to on your own, maybe at a competition and when you're in fantastic shape and everything's clicking, okay. But you're in the middle of a workout, you're not going full speed. Having that little ramp for a little extra air is not bad, especially, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, look at that. You jump 6'6" off the ramp, well, the ramp's 7 inches up. Oh yeah, so it's only 5'11". What's the point? The point is, what were we doing in the air? Because I gave you a free amount of extra air that you didn't really have to work for. So now it's just like, okay, be patient, let that knee ride go, and wait for the right time, and now hit the layout. Because a lot of times, there's other things that affect that too, like my whole being too close to the bar thing. It screws up everything. All your timing, all your mechanics. It rushes all the mechanics. So that's what do you call it? Topic for another time.
For sure.
Well, hey, George, dude, again, we're gonna do this again soon because I want to be involved in your program. If you let me, I'll just volunteer. And we'll break down your videos another time, but I'm getting to the part where my stomach is starting to growl. I hit the ground running and haven't had dinner yet. So and it's getting late for you. You're gonna be up around 12 o'clock. Um, Dude, thank you so much. God bless you for your time. Thank you for
Oh,
your
thank you.
candor, telling us about these things that, went in your life. I love the fact that, you were able to make that change, get looking death in the face is kind of humbling and scaring, I'm sure. And taking the right step, for I'm sure, lots of things involved. Your son, are you married?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
still married, and then was it just the one son? Do you have more than one kid?
I've got one son. Yeah. And
Okay.
he's 30
Yeah,
and
my
he's
son's 20. You and I are pretty similar age range and sons and everything.
nice. Nice. Well, listen, thank you very much for having me on and
Oh, it's a blast.
sharing your wisdom. And
Hey,
thank you for the podcast. Like I'm still back in 2022, so I've got what have I got?
yeah,
Three more three
yeah.
more years of like
I
so
go
I
through
listen on when
lulls
I'm going
here
to
and there,
train.
depending on the
What's that?
time. We go through lulls. Sometimes I won't have anybody for a while, but right now, as we're starting to ramp up training, it seems like I've been bumping into more. I've been bumping into a lot of coaches recently on Instagram. If I find someone that's following me, sometimes I'll look through and go, why would so and so follow me? And then I'm like, oh, they're a coach. Like this guy, I saw one from Purdue, Purdue jumps coach. I'm like, he's got a wife and kids. Look at that, he's a young guy. I got to be twice as old as him. I'm like a grandpa. So I'm just curious. Like I said, I want to, especially someone at a Big Ten school down here. Down here it's the Big Ten and the SEC. If you're a really good jumper, now Grand Valley State is in Michigan, but it's Division II. But they might as well be going to Michigan the way they jump. But yeah, I'm that guy, man. I want to know what somebody's doing. If they're doing better than me, I'm going to copy it and put it to work.
Sure.
You know.
Why not?
All right. Well, hey, George, God bless you, sir. I respectfully reserve the right to do this again and soon. So, we'll stay in
That'll
touch,
be fun.
and
It's been a pleasure.
it has been. Thank you so much for your
Thank you,
time.
Troy.
All right, sir. You have
Yeah,
a good
great.
one. All
Have a
right.
good one. Bye now.
Bye. And that's going to wrap it up here on another episode of Raise the Bar. Just spent over an hour with George from Canada and Graziani. We found out lots about George and started just grooving, talking techniques. So that was a blast. Look forward to talking again with George in the future. He's going to start training for some masters meets Was fortunate enough to get involved with a club up there, and we're going to take it from there. So I have to go get something to eat, and it's been a long day. But tune in again next time here on for another episode of Raise the Bar with Troy Haynes, the Sky High and Fly Guy. Until then, have a great one. God bless you.